All right, Rabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for Tishrei. Dr. Linda Weinberg in loving memory of her husband of 53 years, Dr. Paul Weinberg Peretz Moshe ben Avram David, in commemoration of his fourth yahrzeit, and Avram and Shindy Kelman, in memory of their parents, Jerome and Bernice Kelman, Alexander and Frederica David. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an aliyah and the families in Nechama. And of course, as always, we dedicate our learning in the schos of the return of our precious hostages and the success of our holy soldiers, and Emir Hashem, a year filled with shalom and besoros tovos for Klal Yisrael. Because with that, let us begin. A lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. A really incredible daf ahead of us, chock full of information. Today's daf is Kuf Chaf Vav 126, and we are starting at the top of 126. Amar Ravuna Amar Ravasi. Ravuna said in Ravasi, fascinating halacha. Bechar shemicha micha. If a bechar objects, his objection is a valid one. What is this talking about? Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Amar Ravuna Amar Ravasi. It's about halfway down in the short lines. So remember again, one of the things that we ended off with in yesterday's daf, one of the conclusions of the Gemara, is that if the property appreciates after the death of the father, before the division, the Bechar, the firstborn son, does not share in that appreciation. Right? That we've already established. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Mihu im micha. So, for example, just a simple case, right? We'll call him. We'll say Yaakov dies. Yaakov leaves behind sons: Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven is the Bechar. Shimon and Levi decide to go ahead and improve the property. Reuven does not share in. He does his pishnayim, his double portion, is not reflected in that appreciation. So the Gemara says, "Miu emicha va'amar al tashbichu chalki ela nachlok miyad va'ashbiach anis shnei chalokim shali ve'eto kol shivchan ve'hei niseshim lecha." But let's say after the death of Yaakov, Reuven sees that his brothers want to improve the property. So what does Reuven say? Reuven says, guys, don't do anything. Don't do anything. Leave it alone. Let's go ahead and first split up the property, and then we could all improve our respective portions. So in this case, Reuven here objects. Reuven objects to the division of, Reuven objects to the improvement of the property before the division is made. But meanwhile, Shimon and Levi, they kind of ignore Reuven's statement, and they just go ahead and improve the property. So what's the halacha? Harimicha bahen v'yital pishnayim. So interestingly enough, in this case, because Reuven the Bechar lodged a quote-unquote formal complaint, therefore again he is entitled to take pishnayim in the improvements. You hear this fascinating halacha. In other words, normally if the estate is improved by the brothers after the death of the father before the division, the Bechar doesn't get a double portion, any of those improvements. But in this case over here, the Bechar is lodging a complaint. He's saying, guys, don't improve the property now until we divide it so we can each improve our own portions. If he does that and they still improve it, halacha l'maaseh, he gets pishnayim, he gets double portion, ultimately again in the improvements. Okay, so now we'll see the logic for this later on. The Rashbam says, "Daha paskin lekaman yesh lebechar pishnayim kodim chaluka b'shah shechafetz lizkos b'becharasa." Now all of this comes down to a fascinating concept which we're going to see shortly, which is, technically speaking, the Bechar gets his double portion at the moment of the death of the father, as opposed to other pieces of inheritance which are only acquired upon actual division. The Bechar's entitlement to a double portion is the moment his father dies. So interestingly enough, because of that, therefore Allah Chalamaisa, if he tells the brothers, don't improve the property, guys, don't improve the property until we divide up, and they divide up anyway, and they improve anyway, he has the ability to get double portion of those improvements because effectively he claimed his portion already. Fascinating halacha. So that's Ravasi. So back to the Gemara for just a moment. So Amar Ravasi, B'chor Shemicha Micha, Amar Rabba. Rabba says, Mistaber Tamid Ravasi. So it appears that Ravasi's logic is Ba'anovim ubitzrum, Zeisim umaskum. Right? They were talking about over here a case of, let's say, where Ruvain died and he left behind a vineyard or he left behind olive trees. So now the brothers are ready to pick the grapes or to pick the olives. Ruvain says, guys, don't do it. Let's divide up the estate first and then we'll each improve our respective portions. So we'll say, but they do it anyway. So that's the case where Ravasi says, okay, now there's been an quote-unquote improvement. Ruvain essentially claimed his pishnayim already, and therefore he gets to share, he gets his double portion in the improvements as well. Aval dar umlo. But what happens if the brothers went ahead and crushed the grapes or crushed the olives? In that case, Ruvain would not get a double portion. Now, why would Ruvain not get a double portion? So fascinatingly enough, the Rashbam points out to her something amazing. He says, because if they were to crush it, they've changed the form of it. Once you change the form of it, you acquire the item. So the Rashbam compares it to theft, right? What's the halacha? When you steal something, right, the halacha is v'heshav is hagzil. You're obligated to return the item that you stole. What happens if you stole something and then you change it? What's the halacha? We spent a lot of time on this, right? In the same way that uman kona b'shevach kliya ganav kona b'shevach, right? So a thief acquires the object when he changes it. He's obligated to make restitution, obviously, but he's obligated to go ahead and pay back the value of the item at the time it was stolen. So now, halacha l'maaseh, the Gemara says there's something very interesting comes along Rabba, and Rabba says, when does the Bechar acquire Pishnaim in improved property? That's, for example, in a case where they inherited a vineyard or they inherited olive trees. The brothers are about to harvest the olives or the grapes. Reuven says, please don't do it until we divide up the estate. They do it anyway. Now there's an appreciation. Reuven shares in that appreciation. But if they crush the grapes or they crush the olives, in that case, they acquired these objects through the change that they effected within these objects. So therefore, again, halacha l'maaseh, Reuven does not share in the improvement, because since they changed it, they've acquired it. Reuven obviously gets his portion as it was at the time of the father's death. Rabbi Yosef says no. Afilu darchum. It's not true. Even if the brothers crushed the grapes or crushed the olives, because Reuven said, guys, don't do this, let's divide up the estate, Reuven essentially acquired his double portion, and therefore he shares in the appreciated value now of the wine or of the olive oil. The Gemara says, how could that be? Darchum meikara invi hashta chamra. But how could that be? The item has changed. The item has changed. When Yaakov died, Reuven the Bechar inherited a double portion in grapes and in olives. Now the brothers have done something and changed the state of the object. It's something different. Panim chadashos ba'alakan. It's something new over here. It's something different over here. So how could you say that Reuven should get a double portion in these items? Kida Amar Rav Ukva Bar Chama litin lo demei hezek anovav hachanami no sin lo demei hezek anovav. No. What it means is like this. What it means is as follows: that halacha l'maaseh. You're right. In the event, so we'll say, essentially, what the Gemara is it's upholding our original understanding. Namely, so we'll say, so the Gemara is introducing us to a principle. What's the principle? And the principle is going to be more explicitly stated in just a little bit. A Bechar, so right, we've seen multiple ways in which the inheritance of a Bechar is different than the inheritance of what we call a Pashat, a regular brother, right? So one of the ways we saw in yesterday's daf is Bechar only gets Muchzak, not Roi, only gets from actual property, not entitled property. The other interesting part is that brothers, a Pashat normally only gets his portion, his entitlement to inheritance, when the estate is divided up. A Bechar actually acquires his entitlement at the time that the father dies. Therefore, furthermore, what else have we seen? We've also seen that in an improvement that occurs to the estate, the Bechar doesn't get Pishnayim in that. So now comes along Rav Asi introduces an exception to that rule. If at the time of death, right, the brothers begin to improve the estate or want to improve the estate, and the Bechar is mocha, the Bechar objects. He says, don't do this until we divide up the estate. And they do it anyway. In that case, the Bechar shares in the appreciation. He gets a double portion of the appreciation. Why? Because since he lodged his complaint, it's as if he's activated his portion, therefore he's acquired it, and therefore he acquires any improvements as well. Comes along Rabbah, and Rabbah says that's only assuming that the improvement didn't change the, what's the word? Form, yeah. They didn't change the inherited item, right? But if the improvement changed the inherited item, then again, this halacha doesn't apply because the brothers have acquired their portions through the change. The Gemara now qualifies this and says the only exception to this rule is if the change created a depreciation, then halacha l'maisa, the brothers are obligated to make the bechar whole to go ahead and offset his loss. So for example, like this, if the it's really fascinating. If the brothers were to go ahead and let's say again harvest the grapes, right, and they're ready to crush it. Now the bechar says, please don't do that. Let's divide up our estate first. They do it anyway, and obviously the value of wine is much greater than the value of grapes. The bechar does not get double portion in the newfound value of wine because again the item changed. However, let's say for some strange reason, the value of wine plummets, so now the value of wine is less than the value of grapes. So that as a result of what the brothers did, there is a loss. They are obligated now to offset that loss for their older brother. In other words, he has every right to be made whole, and they bear responsibility for that loss. Interestingly enough, he won't share in the appreciation, but he is protected from depreciation. Okay, fascinating. So we'll say, where was Rav Ukva Bar Chama's? Where was this concept about protecting the older brother from loss? Where was this stated? So we'll say if you have a Bechar and a Pasha, so again, Yaakov died, father Yaakov died. He left behind Reuven and Shimon. Reuven is a Bechar, and he left them grapes. So he left behind grapes for the sons, and they harvested them, right? Or zeisim umaskum, or grapes, and these are different lashonos for harvesting. So that's the halacha. Bechar notal pishnayim afilu darkum. So the bechar gets a double portion, even if they crushed the grapes or they crushed the olives. The Gemara says, what? Darkum? How can you say that he gets pishnayim if they crushed the grapes or crushed the olives? After all, if they crushed it, meikara invi hashta chamra. Again, I will say, remember, what the younger brothers are doing is not right. If the Bechar says, guys, please don't improve the estate until we divide everything up, they should listen to him. Divide up the estate and let everyone do with their portion what they want to do. That's what should happen. But if they don't listen to him and they end up crushing the grapes or crushing the olives, why would the Bechar get Pishnayim in that improvement? After all, they've changed the item. Once they change the item, they acquire it. Once they acquire it, all they're obligated to do is no different than theft. You're obligated to make the victim whole in accordance with the value of the item at that time it was stolen. So too, the brothers would be obligated to make their older brother whole, give him his double portion, in accordance with the value of the estate at the time that they crushed the olives or the grapes. Why would they be obligated to share in the appreciation? To which the Gemara says, no. Amar ukva bar chama litain lo demei hezik anavav. No. What it means is that halacha l'maisa, if there is a depreciation, they are obligated to go and pay him damages for the value of the depreciated property. Okay, beautiful. Said Rabbi say. What comes out over here is as follows, to kind of round this out a little bit. So first of all, we're really being introduced to is this concept, and we'll see where it comes from, but introduced to the concept that a Bechar really receives his entitlement at the time the father dies, as opposed to the other brothers who really only receive their respective portions at the time of actual division. Halacha l'maisa, again, Bechar only gets in muchzak, not ra'i. Bechar doesn't share in any appreciation of the estate done by the brothers after the death of the father. However, if he objects to their appreciation efforts and they go through it anyway, he ultimately shares in that appreciation. If, however, they change the form of the object, he does not share in appreciation. He gets his double portion in accordance with the value of the estate before they change the object. If, however, as a result of the change, there is depreciation, he is protected against that loss. Beautiful. That's our first sugya. Next, Amravasi. Viter. Okay, so this is very interesting. What happens if a Bechar takes a portion just like a regular brother? Now, what does this mean? If you look at the Rashbam is about 12 lines up from the bottom. So listen to this. Let's say same case, Yaakov died. Yaakov left behind 5 fields. Now again, so what happens over here is in every one of those fields, right, the Bechar has a right to get a double portion. Let's say in one of the fields, Reuven says to Shimon and Levi, guys, you know what? I'm just going to take the same portion as both of you. So in other words, he goes ahead and says, I'm just taking a portion like both of you. So what's the halacha? So that's Bechar Shnato Chelek Kipashat Viter. Viter means he's been mevater. He's been mevater. Now, bin mevater means literally he's yielded his right to pishnayim. Look at the Rashbam Viter. Kilomar Hare Machal Chelek Bechora. Right? Ultimately, again, he's gone ahead and yielded his double portion right, his right as a firstborn. Now, both say, now, obviously, now the Gemara asks, my Viter. Now, what exactly has he yielded? So, Rapapa Mishrei de Rav Amar, Viter Ba'osa Soda. So, Rapapa says, he's yielded his Bechor right in that field. In that field, right? In other words, that not in everything else, not in the entire estate, but in that particular field, where he said to his brothers, guys, I'm going to inherit alongside you in accordance with the same division ratios. He's yielded his Bechorite in that field, but not in the rest of the estate. So in terms of the rest of the estate, he's still going to be a Bechor against Pishnayim. In that field, he's going to be a regular brother. Rapapi Mishrei de Rava Amar, Rapapi the name of Rava says, Viter Bechol HaNechasim Kulan. No, Rav Papi says no. Once you yield the right in one field, he has effectively gone ahead and yielded. He has effectively gone ahead and yielded his entire right to the Bechorah, his entire firstborn right. Take a look. Actually, not yet. Fine. So we'll say machlokes, right? So again, here's our case, right? So we have Yaakov dies. Leaves behind 3 sons: Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Reuven's a bechar. They're dividing up the estate. They come to one of the fields, and Reuven says to his brothers, "Guys, let's all divide this equally." So the Gemara says, "Okay, he's yielded his firstborn right. What is he yielding, Rav Papa? He's yielded his right in that particular field, not in the rest of the estate. Rav Papi, he's yielded his entire right as a firstborn." Okay, let's analyze. So Rav Papa Mishmei de Rav Amar Viter Ba'osa Sada. So Rav Papa, in the name of Rava, said he's only yielded in that particular field. Kasavar ein lo lebechar kodem chaluka. So this is very interesting because Rav Papa holds like this. Rav Papa holds that in general, the concept of Rav Papa disagrees with what we said before. Rav Papa says that when does a bechar get his entitlement to pishnayim? When the estate is divided up. It's not a pre-existing right that is generated at the time of the death of the father, but rather, again, it exists at the time that they divide a property. And therefore, again, essentially, that pishnayim right is exercised as the estate is divided up. So they're up to field number one. See, he has double portion in field number 1. He's yielded that right in field 1. Okay, that's all he's done in field 1. We haven't gotten to field 2, 3, 4, 5, and until we get up to the division of those fields, the pishnayim right has not been activated. So because he doesn't have the pishnayim right from the beginning, from the death of the father, therefore again I will say, you can't yield what you don't have. So therefore again, it's not like he's vested with this right immediately. The right manifests itself as the estate is divided up. So therefore, again, if he yields the right in field A, fine, he's yielded it for field A, but we're not up to field B, C, D, and E yet. We'll get to those as we come up. And again, he could yield the right in those fields, or he could exercise the right in those fields. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam says, "Kasavra ein lo bechar." About times are from the bottom. Chelik bechor lo loseis v'lo limkar kodim chaluka kidichsev loseis lo ad asya liyadei timekabel matana hilchach. So, in other words, the idea is, remember, we saw this before, that pishnai, at least according to one opinion, is looked at as a matana, as a gift. When is a gift yours? When is it yours? When the object comes to your hand. That's when it's yours. So therefore, again, the pishnayim right only comes up as the property is divided. So therefore, again, if they're dividing one field at a time, the pishnayim right is activated field by field, and therefore what you yield in one field does not impact what happens in a different field. That's Rav Papa. On the other hand, Rav Papi Mishmei de Rava Amar Vita Hakol. Rav Papi, the name of Rava, says no. Once Ruvain the Bechar yields his pishnayim right in field A, he's yielded his entire pishnayim right. Why? Because he holds kasavar yeshlo lebechar kodim chaluka. He holds. Listen to this. Literally translated, a Bechar has his double portion right even before the property is divided. Umida achel baha. And once you've yielded in one property, you've yielded everything. Now, both say, take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. So this is the concept that Rav Asi was alluding to before as well. Look at the Rashbam. Rashbam is about 6 lines up from the bottom, 7 lines up from the bottom. Afagav the chelik pashet einlo dak siv loses mishas shemesa av huray litenlo hilchach bebechar talya milsa de b'sha sheyirtze yiske bechaluko kidarmina lael bechar shemicha micha v'hilchach yesh koach biyado limchol kol shah sheyirtze tainu davar shebali olam. So both say, now listen to this. So according to this approach, and again, this was the concept that we saw before in the Gemara, starting with Rav Asi, that essentially the way we view a bechar, the pasuk says, "Lo says lo," right? Ultimately, again, that when does a bechar get his pishnayim right? When does the right vest? At the time of the death of the father. Father dies, Bechar gets his pishnayim right then and there. So because he has that right, therefore what? He also has the right to yield it from the beginning. And therefore Rav Papi views this, that if once he's mevater, once he yields that right in one field, we view that as him viewing his right in totality. And therefore he is giving up his pishnayim right in all of the fields. Fascinating. So the Gemara goes right there. So Rabbi Shmuel, the Rava Amar Vita b'chol nechasim kulan. Why? Kasav this lashon. Kasavar yesh lo bechar kodim chaluka. A bechar already has his double portion right, his pishnayim right, even before the division. Umida achal baha achal b'kulhu. And since he's yielded in field A, we take that to mean that he's yielded in all of the fields, in all of the property. So essentially, the machlokes comes down to the following nikuda. When does a bechar, or I should say, when does the pishnayim right vest? So according to Rav Papa, it only vests as the estate is divided up, and it vests with each individual parcel that is divided up. And therefore, if the bechar yields his right in one field, that doesn't impact what happens in other fields. Rav Papi, no, the right vests as soon as the father dies. As soon as he dies, the bechar is entitled to pishnayim. Obviously, we don't know how that pishnayim is going to manifest itself until they divide up the actual estate. But Lamaisa, the right is there from the beginning. And therefore, according to Rav Papi, if the bechar yields that right in any one field, he's yielded the right in totality. Incredible. Again, I will say, and just to kind of link this back, Rav Asi in the beginning of today's daf was clearly holding like Rav Papi, that Allah Chalamaisa, the bechar gets his pishnayim right from the moment that the father dies. That's why, again, going backwards, if the brothers are ready to improve the estate, and the bechar says, guys, don't do it, thereby exercising his right now, and they do it anyway, he shares he gets pishnayim in those improvements as well. Incredible. Okay, so the Gemara goes like this. The Gemara says, "God, v'ha d'Rapapi v'Rapapa la beferish itmar ela michlal itmar." And by the way, Rapapi and Rapapa, ultimately their respective positions were not stated explicitly, but rather were inferred. Where was it inferred from? Here we go. Story. Dahu b'char. We'll say second wide line on Kufcha Vav 126a. Dahu b'char da azal zabin nechasei didei udepashit. So there was a b'char. Was a Bechar, right? So again, same case. Yaakov died, left behind Ruvain and Shimon. Meanwhile, what happened? So Ruvain went ahead and Ruvain sold off all of the estate property. Now the Rashbam says over here, it was not Ruvain's intention to defraud his younger brother Shimon, but rather what Ruvain just wanted to liquidate the estate. And he was going to give the money. He was going to give the money to Shimon. That was his. Or Shimon's. He was going to give Shimon's. He was going to keep his portion and give Shimon's portion to Shimon. Okay. So what ended up happening? In the meantime, Shimon died. Shimon died and left behind children. So obviously, Shimon's children inherit his inheritance position. So they're going to get his portion of the estate. So what happened? Azal Yasmi b'nei Pashat lemechal Tamri mehani lekuchos. So what happened? So just to illustrate this. So Yaakov died. He left behind a field of date palms. Okay. Ruvain the Bechar decided, wrongly, but we'll see if it's wrongly, decided on his own to liquidate the estate, to sell it off. He was going to take the proceeds, take his portion, and give the rest to Shimon. In the meantime, Shimon died, so now Reuven sold off the estate. Shimon's kids come to take dates from the field, right? Because from Shimon's kids' perspective, this is our father's inheritance. We have a right to the dates. So they come to take dates from the field. Meanwhile, machunu. So the people who bought the field started hitting the Yisomim, right? Because they're like, you guys are stealing dates from us. In other words, remember, so we'll call it, Yitzchak bought the field. Yitzchak bought the field from Ruvain, right? And again, he has no idea what's going on over here. So he bought the field from Ruvain. Meanwhile, again, Shimon's kids are showing up eating dates on Yitzchak's newly purchased field. Well, Yitzchak begins to give them a little frask, right? A little patch. Get out of here. So what happens? Amrlu Krovim. So the relatives, right? The relatives of Reuven and Shimon, the brothers say, "Lo mistaya dezabninhu lenechase ela mimcha nami mechisuluhu." So interesting enough, the relatives of Reuven and Shimon say to Yitzchak, a chutzpah, not only did you buy estate property, but now you're going ahead and patching the kids as well. So poor Yitzchak, right? Yitzchak Bepashtus has no idea what's going on over here, but Lamais now they're making a claim. Also, so they brought the case before Rava. So Amrlahu Rava said, Lo asa velo klum. So essentially, the way Rava Paskin was, Reuven's actions were illegal. Reuven's actions were illegal and therefore, again, are not halachically binding. Essentially, it sounds like what Rava did over here is Rava voided the sale. Reuven, you had no right to go ahead and do what you did. Therefore, the sale is voided. The estate goes back. And division will happen normally. So Rashbam says, Lo asa habachar velo kluma mechirazu. So Reuven the Bechar did absolutely nothing with this sale. Okay, so now what does this mean? Amud Beis. So Mar Savar lo asa klum bepalga, Umar Savar bekulhu. So both say the machlokes Rav Papi and Rav Papa over here was, what did Rava mean when he said you didn't do anything? One opinion said that he didn't do, in other words, that Reuven's sale was ineffective for Shimon's half. For Shimon's half, in other words, what Reuven did for himself is absolutely valid. But what he did for Shimon is invalid. And Umar Savar Bakulu. And the other opinion says, no, the total sale is invalid as well. Now both say, what's the machlokes over here? What's the machlokes? The machlokes is, when does a Bechar get his Pishnayim portion? Does he get it from the moment that the father died? In which case, he has a right to sell his portion even before the estate is divided. Or no, he doesn't go ahead and get his portion until when? Until the estate itself is actively divided. And that's, so the Gemara is pointing out over here that that's how we glean these positions of Rav Papi and Rav Papa from this particular case. All right, interesting. Shalchu mitam. They send from there, that if a Bechar sells his portion before the division of the estate, such a sale is totally invalid. Alma, Ein lo lebachar kodim chaluka. What do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa bachar does not have an entitlement to his portion before the estate is divided. The hilchasa, what's the halacha? Yesh lebachar kodim chaluka. Right? The halacha is a bachar has his portion. In other words, the pishnayim right vests as soon as the father dies, even before the estate is divided up. Marzutra, so the Gemara says, Marzutra, Midirishba, that's a place, Palag Bitsana de Papali, Bahada Achin Bishava. So Marzutra, who was from Midirishba, was a Bachar, inherited with his brothers, and he inherited a basket of peppers, and he split it up evenly with his brothers. And he said too, so we went to Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Shmuel said to Marzutra, since you were mevater, since you yielded your firstborn right in the basket of peppers, you've yielded your firstborn right in totality. So both says halacha l'maisa. The way the Gemara seems to end off over here is that the pishnayim right vests right after the death of the father. Therefore, the bechar is entitled to pishnayim even before the division of the estate. Therefore, if the bechar yields that right in any one parcel, he's yielded everything. And to go back to Rav Asi, therefore also if he tells the brothers, guys, don't improve the estate before we go ahead and they divide it, and they improve it anyway, he gets to share in that improvement with all the caveats that we mentioned before. And I will say the Rambam, by the way. Now the interesting part is, what about if a bachar sells his property before the division? What happens there? So the Rambam actually paskins that Allah Chalamaysa bachar shemachar chelik bechora kodim chaluka mimkaro kayim mipnei sheish lebachar chelik bechora kodim chaluka. So the Rambam paskins like this Gemara. So namely again that the pishnayim right exists or vests at the moment of the father's death. Therefore, technically speaking, if the bachar sells his portion before the estate is divided, such a sale is a valid sale. He can't sell the brother's portions, obviously, because it's not his, but Allah Chalamaysa, he has the ability to sell his own. Therefore, halacha l'maisa paskin is that again, Bechar gets his pishnayim right, the right vests immediately upon the death of the father, and again, all of the other halachas that stem from that. Incredible. Mishnah. The Bava said this is a fascinating Mishnah. Here we go. Ha'omer ish ploni b'ni Bechar lo yital pishnayim. Or ish ploni b'ni lo yirash im echav lo amar klum sheis namash shakasa b'torah. Supposed to say, here we go. So now we're dealing with halachas of inheritance. Let's say a father says, I don't want my children to inherit with the halachic laws of inheritance. I want them to inherit equally. So a father literally says, right, Yaakov says, I know I have a Bechar Ruvain, but I don't want my Bechar Ruvain to get a double portion. Instead, right, I want all of my sons to inherit equally, right? Or again, I don't want my Bechar, or for that matter, again, that's case one. Case two is, I don't want Ruvain. I'm not happy with the life that he's living. I don't want him to inherit at all with my sons. What's the halacha? Such a statement is halachically meaningless. Why? Hisna mashakasa b'Torah. Because we'll say the halacha is like this: if you make a t'nai, a condition that runs contrary to Torah law, your t'nai is batal. The Torah says a bechar gets a double portion. The Torah says that all sons inherit, and therefore if a father goes ahead and makes a condition that runs contrary to Torah law, the father's t'nai is irrelevant, is void, and the bechar gets his pishnayim, and Ruvain inherits with his brothers. However, hamechalik nechasav al piv riba la'echad u'miyat la'echad v'hishva lahenes habechar dvarav kayamin. I will say, but what can you do? This is interesting. What can you do? So let's say a parent wants their children to inherit equally, or doesn't want one child to inherit. What can you do? You can gift your property away during your lifetime. So obviously, if you gift your property away as a gift, there are no halachas with gifts, right? So if I want to go ahead and gift away my entire estate during my lifetime, I could gift to whoever I want and however I want. So I will say, so this is quite fascinating. Mishnah is telling us that you can't leave a will that contradicts Torah law. And if you do, the will is batal, and ultimately Torah law stands. So what do you do if you want some type of different inheritance arrangement for your kids? The answer is, don't use the mechanism of inheritance, use the mechanism of matana. Because with the gift, now again, the difference is also, what's the difference in inheritance and gift? Difference is, right? Inheritance occurs after death. Gift has to occur during the lifetime of the grantor, right? You can't give a gift posthumously. Gift can only be given through the lifetime. So we'll see the mechanism over here. So the Gemara says as follows: Kasav bein betchila bein be'emtza bein besov mishum matan advar kayamin. Now we'll say, if you wrote a document, this is interesting. We're going to we'll flesh this out in the Gemara a little bit. If you wrote a document and it sounds like the document is an inheritance document, but somewhere in that document you use the lotion of matana, it works as a matana, and you could gift the property however you want to gift it. Again, we'll see the scope of that. We'll see the scope of that in the Gemara a little bit later. Says the Gemara. So the first thing we spoke about is this idea that if a father, right, so Father Yaakov goes ahead and says, I do not want Ruvain, my Bachar, to get a double portion, or I don't want Ruvain to inherit it all. That's masna mashakasa b'Torah. That's making a Tanai that contradicts Torah law. If you make a Tanai that contradicts Torah law, to know batal. To know batal, such a condition is batal and therefore is void. So Leim Masih look Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Yehuda. What did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda, this is very interesting. Ha'amar bedavar shalmamon tano kayim. Rabbi Yehuda holds that although generally we say that if you make a Tanai that runs contrary to Torah law, your Tanai is batal, Rabbi Yehuda holds in financial matters, if you make a Tanai contrary to Torah law, the Tanai works. Now where do we see that with Rabbi Yehuda? Listen to this. This is interesting, right? Reuven goes over to Rachel and he says, "Hariat mikudeshes li amanas she'ein lach alai sher ksus va'ona." The winner, right? So Reuven says to Rachel, right? You become mikudesh on the condition that you have no claims against me, not for food, not for clothing, not for intimacy, nothing. What's the halacha? Halei mikudesh to know about the Remer. Remer says they're married. Mikudeshes. What about the Tanai? The Tanai is batal. Why I both said? Because again, you can't make halachically, you can't make a Tanai that contradicts an element of biblical law. It doesn't work. Therefore, we essentially view the Tanai as non-existent. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Bedavar shalmamon tano kayim." Rabbi Yehuda says, "No, it works." Now, interesting enough, what Rabbi Yehuda will say is like this: it doesn't work for ona, it doesn't work for intimacy, but it absolutely works for food and clothing. Those are financial things, and you can make a Tanai. So we'll say, so obviously our Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Yehuda. To which one says, no. I feel to Rabbi Yehuda, hasam yada v'kamachla, hacha lo kamachol. No. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say it works in the case of Kiddushin? Why does Rachel say, listen, Rachel understands what Reuven is saying. So Rachel has these entitlements to food and clothing. If Rachel is willing to yield those entitlements, that's her business. If she's mochal, right? If she's machla, if she forgives those rights, that's her right. She's a consenting adult. She's entering into this relationship. And if she's willing to yield those financial rights, then that is within her ability. But in our Mishnah, Ruvain, the Bachar, who's either not getting his pishnayim or is being cut out of the will, is not yielding. Right? He's not being asked for his consent. He's not being asked as to whether or not he's willing to yield this right. So therefore, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that this is a case of a Tanai which runs contradictory to Torah law, and therefore Allah Lamaisa is going to be batal. Incredible. Amar Rav Yosef. Listen to this. Well, there's another couple of interesting cases over here about Bachar. Amar Rav Yosef. Amar Ish Ploni B'ni Bechori Huron Tapishnayim. But say, listen to this. Let's say, right? We don't know. Yaakov just moves to town. He moves here with his family, and Yaakov says, by the way, Ruvain is my Bachar. Ruvain is my Bachar. Based on that statement, now we don't know Reuven, we don't know Yaakov, but Yaakov made a declarative statement that Reuven is his Bachar. Based on that statement, and now Yaakov dies, Beis Din will say, okay, Reuven, you get Pishna, you get a double portion. In other words, if a man acknowledges that this person is his firstborn, that statement is halachically meaningful as well. Ish Ploni Bachar. Let's say Reuven were to say, Yaakov were to say, Reuven is a Bachar. Now, you hear the distinction between the two Lashonos. In case number one, Yaakov is saying, Reuven is my Bachar. Okay, so now we look at that as the declarative statement that Reuven is Yaakov's Bechar. Therefore, when Yaakov dies, Reuven gets Pishnayim. Let's say Yaakov were to say Reuven is a Bechar. Reuven is a Bechar. In that case, Reuven would not get Pishnayim. Why not? Dilma Buchra Di'ima Ka'amar. Because maybe what Yaakov is saying is, Reuven is a Bechar. What type of Bechar? What type of Bechar? A maternal Bechar. He's his mother's Bechar. It's not my Bechar, it's his mother's Bechar. All right, so a story. There was a guy who came before Rabbi Bar Chana. Amrlei muchzakani bazeh shehu bechar. So this is interesting. So a guy came before Rabbi Bar Chana. He said, Rabbi Bar Chana, that guy Reuven, I know that Reuven is Yaakov's bechar. All right. Amrlei mino yadata. So he said to him, so Rabbi Bar Chana asks the guy, how do you know that Reuven is Yaakov's Bechar? Because listen to this. The guy said, I overheard Yaakov talking to his son, Tahavi karile avua buchra sichla. I heard Yaakov call Reuven a foolish Bechar. Okay. Family dynamics, right? So I heard him go ahead. I know what he's claiming over here is, I heard him call him a buchra sichla. The Rashbam says over here, bechar shota, a foolish bechar. So Rabbi Bar Chana says, well, 1 second. Dilma buchra di'imahu. Maybe buchra sichla means that he's a bechar for his mother. Now, why would that mean that? Listen to this. So the Gemara says, the chol buchra di'ima nami buchra sichla kalu. Because every maternal firstborn, every bechar from the mother is called a buchra sichla. Now, what does that mean? If you take a look at the Rashbam, this is actually quite fascinating. The chol buchra dima buchra sichla, 5 lines up from the bottom. V'lo mishum shtuso. It's not because it's the sichla in this case. Even though sichla normally means like a fool, in this case it doesn't mean fool. What does it mean? It means stunted. Stunted. So he says, El lefi she'eno bechar gomer kama hadas shota. Just like I will say again, Baruch Hashem, reminiscent of Sukkot, right? Just like you have a hadas shota. Hadas shota is a stunted hadas, a stunted myrtle branch. So often, again, a bechar from the mother was called a bechar sichla, a stunted bechar. Why? Because on one hand, it's a bechar, but Lamais has none of the biblical entitlements of a firstborn. So the Rabbi Bar Chana said the fact that you overheard this exchange between father and son does not in any way mean that this is an actual bechar. Another story. First right line at the bottom. There was a guy who came before Rabbi Chanina. Same case, right? Same case. So the guy came before Rabbi Chanina. Says, Rabbi Chanina, I know that this boy Reuven is a bechar for his father Yaakov. Amrlei minaya data. So Rabbi Chanina says, no, from where do you know this from? Amrlei dechi hava asal gabe avua. So listen to this. It's fascinating because whenever somebody would come to the father, to Yaakov, Amar lahu, Yaakov would say to the person, Zilu legabe shichachas bri. Go to my son Shichas. That was the kid's name. Go to my son Shichas. Debuchrahu, because again he's a bechar. Umasi ruke, and his saliva will heal you. Okay, a lot to unpack over here. So apparently the Rashbam points out over here that it was believed, and again I will say this is one of these things that falls into the bucket of Talmudic medicine. Remember, like we always speak about, Talmudic medicine is not Torah. Talmudic medicine is whatever the conventionally held beliefs of the time reflected. So it's kind of like the whole thing with like leeches, right? Bloodletting and fatty meat and undiluted wine. So that was the cure for everything, right? If you had fatty meat, undiluted wine, and leeches, you were good to go, right? And apparently throw in there a little bit of saliva from a firstborn kid, you're golden, right? You're golden. No copay for that advice, right? You're good to go. So I'll say. So just to point out, this is what was felt for the time. So apparently, it was felt that the saliva of a firstborn son had curative powers. So therefore, halacha l'maisa. The Gemara says over here that in this case, so this guy said, I heard that whenever somebody would come to Reuven, he would say, go to Buchra, my son. He's a firstborn, and his saliva has curative powers. I maybe he was the firstborn for his mother. Gemiri, Buchra da'aba masiruke, Buchra di'ima la masiruke. No. So this is a better case. Why? Because in this case, it's known, it's only the saliva of a firstborn son to his father that has curative powers, but the saliva of a firstborn son of the mother father doesn't have curative power. So therefore, in this particular case over here, this would be a good raya. This would be a good raya that ultimately, again, the son was a bachar. So we'll stop over here for today. Shkoyach, everyone. Incredible Gemara. All right, Chevra Zoom, have a great day, everyone.